The morning sunlight streamed through the grand windows of the bridal suite, gilding the room in a soft golden glow. I stood in front of the mirror, my fingers trembling slightly as they smoothed the lace of my wedding dress. It was more than just a gown, it was a symbol of everything I had dreamed of: love, happiness, and a future I thought I had secured. My heart fluttered with excitement, a delicate bird caught in the cage of my ribcage. Today was the day. My day. The flowers were arranged perfectly, cascading like a waterfall of blush and ivory roses. The scent was intoxicating, mingling with the soft hum of the string quartet warming up downstairs. My bridesmaids fussed over me with practiced smiles, pinning tiny pearls into my hair and adjusting the folds of my dress. Everyone seemed to be smiling, but I could feel the quiet tension of anticipation pulsing through the air. It was a good tension, the kind that comes with absolute certainty that life is about to change in the best possible way. And then my fiancé, my love, my supposed partner for life, vanished. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind hundreds of times. The walk down the aisle, the look in his eyes, the words we'd exchange, "I do," a promise sealed in eternity. But as the guests filled the chapel, their murmurs like ripples in a still pond, the space where he should have been remained stubbornly empty. At first, I thought it was some kind of cruel joke. Perhaps he was hiding behind the grand wooden doors, ready to surprise me. But as the minutes ticked by, my stomach twisted into icy knots. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Someone coughed awkwardly. Someone else shifted uncomfortably in their seat. My chest tightened, and a trembling hand pressed to my lips to stifle the panic rising like a storm tide. The priest cleared his throat, glancing at me with a sympathy I could hardly bear. "Shall we begin?" he asked hesitantly. I forced a smile, my throat too tight for words. The music swelled, and I took my first tentative steps down the aisle, the train of my gown brushing against the marble floor. Every eye in the room was on me, and yet it felt like I was invisible. My mind raced, searching for a reason, a logical explanation. Maybe he had an emergency. Maybe he had been delayed. My pulse hammered with hope that crumbled as quickly as it came. Finally, the truth crashed over me in a wave of searing humiliation. He wasn't coming. He had abandoned me. Not for a moment, not with a whispered excuse, not even with a call that might have spared me this agony. I was left standing there, the center of attention, heart splintered and bare, a bride without a groom. Tears burned behind my eyes as I forced myself to keep moving, step by agonizing step, each footfall echoing the betrayal in my chest. The guests shifted, uncomfortable, uncertain how to comfort someone so publicly humiliated. My mother's hand trembled on my shoulder, but even her touch could not ease the storm of shame and sorrow that enveloped me. I reached the altar, my lips trembling as I opened them to speak, only for silence to answer me. The priest's eyes were kind but helpless. The aisle felt impossibly long, the crowd impossibly silent, and I realized with crushing clarity that my life, the life I thought I had carefully planned, had shattered in an instant. And as I stood there, heartbroken and alone, the first sob tore from my chest, a raw, uncontrollable sound that seemed to shake the walls themselves. I had imagined this day 1,000 times, and yet the reality was far crueler than any nightmare. My perfect day had turned into a story of betrayal, and I didn't know if I could ever stand again. But even in that unbearable pain, in the hollow ache of abandonment, a tiny spark of something else flickered in my chest: anger. Not just heartbreak anger. And deep down, beneath the tears and the trembling, I knew this was only the beginning of a journey I had yet to take. I barely remember how I got out of the chapel. My legs felt like lead. My chest still raw from the sobs that refused to be silenced. Guests murmured around me, offering awkward condolences, their eyes flicking nervously between me and the empty space where my fiancé should have been. I wanted to vanish, to sink beneath the marble floors and disappear entirely. And then I felt a presence behind me, calm, deliberate, entirely unlike anyone else in the room. "Are you all right?" a deep, smooth voice asked. I turned startled and found him there. My boss, Alexander Hart, standing in the doorway with his tailored suit and that infuriatingly composed expression that always made me feel both seen and exposed. I had known him professionally for years, had admired him quietly from a distance. But now, seeing him framed in the golden light of the chapel, he looked almost otherworldly. I'm fine," I whispered, though my voice cracked, betraying me immediately. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a careful step closer, his eyes scanning me with a mixture of concern and something I couldn't quite name. "No," he said finally, firm and unwavering, "you're not fine, and no one should be treated like this." I swallowed hard, unsure whether to feel relief or embarrassment. Somehow, he had cut through the haze of my shame with the mere weight of his presence. My tears were still wet on my cheeks, my hair slightly mussed from frantic hands, and yet there was something grounding in the way he looked at me. Not pity, not judgment, just steady understanding. "I can't believe he just left me," I admitted, voice trembling. "In front of everyone, I thought he loved me." Alexander's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "Some people are not who they pretend to be," he said softly, almost as if he were speaking to himself. Then, leaning in, he lowered his voice until it was just a whisper. "Pretend I'm the groom." The words hit me like a jolt of lightning. My mind screamed in disbelief, my heart stuttered. What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely audible. He smiled faintly, a glimmer of mischief behind his otherwise composed demeanor. "Let me stand there with you, with everyone watching. Hold their attention for a moment, buy you time. Let them think you're not completely abandoned. Trust me." I hesitated, staring into his eyes. Could I? Should I? But the thought of enduring one more humiliating second alone at the altar was unbearable. With a shaky nod, I whispered, "Okay." He offered his hand, which I took tentatively. As soon as our fingers touched, an unexpected warmth spread through me. He guided me back to the front, standing where my fiancé should have been. The guests murmured, some puzzled, some relieved, as if sensing that perhaps the situation wasn't as dire as it seemed. Alexander's presence lent me a strength I hadn't known I possessed. "Thank you," I muttered, barely above a whisper. "You don't have to thank me," he replied, his voice soft yet unwavering. "Right now, you just need to breathe. Let me worry about the rest." And just like that, the storm inside me calmed slightly. With him by my side, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt since my world fell apart. Hope. Not the naive hope of love or a perfect ending, but the quiet, determined hope that I could survive this. That maybe I could even rise from the ashes of humiliation with my dignity intact. As I glanced at him, something strange and unspoken passed between us. It was more than gratitude. It was connection, trust, and a subtle thrill that made my pulse race. In that moment, I realized I wasn't entirely alone, not anymore. And perhaps, just perhaps, the man who had abandoned me had underestimated not only my strength, but the allies I could find when I needed them most. The days that followed my wedding, the nightmare were a blur of whispered condolences, awkward social calls, and nights spent staring at the ceiling, questioning everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and myself. My fiancé, no, the man who had promised me forever, was already erasing me from his life, and the sting of betrayal cut deeper than I had thought possible. But amid the heartbreak, Alexander's presence became my anchor. He didn't smother me with pity or offer empty platitudes. Instead, he listened. He noticed the small victories I managed to achieve, walking past the wedding venue without collapsing, holding my head high in the face of gossip, returning calls to my family with composure. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to stir something inside me I hadn't felt in weeks, determination. One evening, as we walked through the city streets after a late meeting, Alexander broke the silence. "You deserve better than him," he said, his eyes dark and serious, scanning the crowd as if the world itself might overhear. "And the right people will see it too. You don't need to plead for respect or love. You take it." I glanced at him, my emotions raw and tangled. "It's not that easy," I admitted. He's ruined everything. Everyone saw me like that." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Good," he said, softly but firmly. "Let them see how he left you. Then watch what happens when he realizes it's not you who's broken, it's him." I frowned, not sure if I understood. But something in his tone, the certainty, the quiet power, made my chest tighten. Could I really rise from this humiliation and turn it into strength? Could I make him regret every thoughtless, selfish decision he had made? Over the next few weeks, Alexander became my confidant in more ways than one. He helped me untangle the legal mess of the wedding contracts, discreetly repaired some of the financial fallout my ex had tried to hide, and guided me through social appearances where whispers of my abandoned bride status still lingered. Every interaction with him sharpened my resolve. I wasn't just surviving, I was planning. The first clue to my sweet revenge came unexpectedly. While going through some of the wedding documents, I discovered a series of emails between my ex and his business associates. The truth hit like a hammer. He hadn't married me for love. He had married me for status, for connections, for financial gain. Everything I thought was real, the promises, the late-night smiles, the tender moments, had been a facade. Rage ignited within me, hot and bright. I could almost feel the pulse of it, coiling through my veins like electricity. And Alexander, calm, strategic, brilliant Alexander, was right there beside me, offering guidance without judgment. His steady presence, a reminder that I was no longer powerless. "We can fix this," he said quietly one night, as I showed him the incriminating emails. "Not by pleading or crying, not by begging for him to see what he's lost, but by taking your power back, by making him regret every second he ever underestimated you." I looked at him, and for the first time since the wedding, I felt a thrill that had nothing to do with fear. It was a spark of excitement, of possibility. Sweet revenge didn't mean cruelty. It meant strategy, elegance, and the kind of satisfaction that only comes when the truth finally rises to the surface. And so I began to plan, not recklessly but with precision. Every move my ex had made, every public gesture of arrogance, became a stepping stone in my carefully constructed path. Every opportunity to shine, to reclaim my dignity, and to assert my worth became part of the plan. Alexander was there at every step, not just as an accomplice, but as a partner in strategy, a silent observer of my growing power, and a subtle presence that made my heart race in ways I had long since thought impossible. The lines between gratitude, trust, and something far deeper began to blur. But for now, the focus was clear. I would not only survive his betrayal, I would triumph. Because the woman standing here, battered but unbroken, was no longer the bride abandoned at the altar. She was a force to be reckoned with. And when the time came, he would understand, in the most unforgettable way, exactly what he had thrown away. The day of reckoning arrived quietly, almost unassumingly. My ex, oblivious as ever, had begun flaunting his supposed victory, his arrogance now an open invitation to expose the truth. But I had no intention of rushing. Every detail had been meticulously planned, every move carefully calculated. What had once felt like unbearable heartbreak had been transformed into a weapon, my patience, my dignity, and the subtle art of public triumph. Alexander had been at my side through it all, his calm presence steadying my nerves and guiding each step. Yet as we approached the venue where my ex had arrogantly decided to host a post-wedding gala, an event designed to showcase his success, in disregard for me, I felt a thrill that had nothing to do with fear. This was our moment. The lights shimmered against the glass walls of the grand ballroom. Guests mingled, oblivious to the storm about to unfold, laughing at the jokes of the man who had once abandoned me. I took a deep breath, letting the sound of my own pulse remind me of how far I had come. Alexander's hand brushed mine, a small, grounding touch, and I realized in that instant that I wasn't just seeking revenge. I was reclaiming my life. "Remember," Alexander whispered, "this isn't just about him, this is about you." I nodded, and the doors opened. Every eye in the room turned toward me, the subtle hush of curiosity rippling through the crowd. My ex froze, his smile faltering as he finally saw me. Not the desperate, abandoned bride he had left at the altar, but a woman radiant with confidence, elegance, and undeniable power. The first sting of humiliation fell upon him like ice. Whispers spread like wildfire. "She looks incredible. Who is that with her?" Alexander's presence beside me only amplified the effect. His composed authority and quiet dominance were impossible to ignore. He didn't just stand with me, he elevated me, making my confidence contagious. And then came the moment I had been waiting for. A carefully arranged revelation, emails, contracts, and undeniable proof of my ex's deceit was presented subtly, strategically, by mutual business contacts who had once admired him but had been kept. In the dark, his betrayal was laid bare for everyone to see, the truth of his selfishness, his greed, and his cowardice. I watched him falter, a mask of arrogance cracking as the guests whispered among themselves. I didn't need to speak. My victory was visible in every measured step I took, in the unwavering gaze I held, and in the quiet composure Alexander offered beside me. You're, he stammered, his voice brittle, incapable of forming a coherent argument. But I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. My triumph wasn't in words. It was in the undeniable reality of my resilience. As the night wore on, I realized something even more profound. I had not only taken my power back from him, I had discovered a strength I hadn't known existed within me. The heartbreak had been a crucible, and I had emerged unshakable, radiant, and fully alive. And then there was Alexander. The spark that had begun at the chapel, the subtle tension, the unspoken connection, they had grown into something more tangible, more profound. Standing beside me now, he looked at me not with admiration alone, but with something deeper, respect, affection, and undeniable longing. When the crowd had settled into murmurs of surprise and awe, Alexander finally spoke, his voice low and intimate, meant for me alone. "You've always been extraordinary," he said. "You just didn't realize it until you had no other choice but to see it yourself." My lips curved into a smile, one of genuine joy and quiet triumph. "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted, my heart swelling with gratitude, and something more, something tender and electric. He took my hand, lifting it gently. "You never needed me, but I'm glad I was here." In that moment, I understood the truth I had been seeking all along. Revenge had been sweet, yes, but healing had been sweeter. Love had found me again, not through deceit, not through promises, but through trust, support, and shared strength. As we walked out of the ballroom together, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't thought possible just weeks ago. I had survived betrayal, I had reclaimed my dignity, and I had discovered a love that was real, enduring, and entirely my own. The woman abandoned at the altar had disappeared. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and radiant. A woman who knew that heartbreak could be transformed into triumph, and that the right love always waits where strength and courage meet.